exciting things, right? First Monday, exciting things. There's a lot of moments in your life where there's going to be a moment of excitement because something is new, because new things are exciting, right? I'm pretty sure all of us in here remember whenever you got your first car, whether it was brand new or just new to you. Whenever it's new, you're excited. This is my car. I'm going to take care of my new car. And then a year later, you can't see the floorboard because it's covered in papers and water bottles and French fries that have fallen as you've eaten in that car over the past year. But they haven't molded because they came from McDonald's and nothing changes from there. And so, you have the moment of newness. And what happens is the reason that your car gets to that point, the reason why my truck looks like that right now, is because the newness fades. At some point in time, whatever was new and exciting, kind of the shine on it kind of wears off. And the same thing happens in our couple from the story of the Song of Songs. That's what we're looking at tonight, whenever the newness has faded away. And what that means for this couple is that they're a great example of a real couple for us. Newness fades away. Think about your own dating life. Whenever you first meet someone and you're like, oh, we're kind of interested, you start talking, and it's that like, oh my gosh, they're texting me, butterflies in my stomach. And then you start having long conversations. I remember whenever Jesse and I, when we first started talking, I didn't know I was completely in the friend zone. I didn't know this. But we were having, who has 2-hour-long conversations with someone they're putting in the friend zone, right? 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 That's so wrong. There's some wrong people in here. So you have those 2-hour-long conversations that end up, a little while later, they're 30 minutes, and then before you know it, they're 10 minutes, and 5 minutes of that is going, yeah, so how was your day? Those awkward, because the newness has faded away from all the things you had to talk about. And then by the time, the good news about that is, by the time that you get to that point in conversation, you've gotten to the point romantically where, like, you're probably kissing. And so it's like, we don't even need to talk, I just want to kiss your face. And so you have the first kiss, though, right? The moments leading up to the first kiss, that excitement, that anticipation, that, man, this is the moment I've been waiting for. What's this going to be like? Is this the right time? All right, I'm making my move, and you go for it. Another awkward part of mine and Jesse's relationship, our first kiss, we were going on a date and I had to swing by my apartment real quick. So we went up, and as we're leaving, I'm locking the door, cut the lights out, and it's just like I didn't plan it. It was that moment. And so I grab her and I kiss her. And basically, right as our lips met, my 7-year-old little brother decided to call me for the first time in over a year. I'm not kidding. Of all the moments, as soon as our lips met, 7-year-old Jet Rogers goes, "Hey, Bubba." What? Like, that's literally interrupted our first kiss. But you end up, I answered it after the kiss was over, okay? I wasn't like, hold up. Hello? No, we had that. It was just like, you felt it by your like, zzz, 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 and you're like, I should have put it on silent. But anyway, I digress. But you have your first kiss, and that first kiss is exciting, and then you get to the point now, we've been married for a little over 5 years, and now whenever we leave, it's like, hey, see you later, babe. Okay, a little peck on the lips, and it's like, was there that moment that you're like, oh, I get to kiss this person for the first time? No, because the newness of that had gone. And so for our couple tonight, they're at that point in their marriage. They've been married for a little while. They've been living together. They've been doing life. They've established routines. And the newness of this relationship where they get to live together and be married the way that God has designed for them to be, the newness of all that has gone. It doesn't mean they don't love each other. It just means that every little moment isn't as exciting. They get to a point of familiarity with each other. And so what we're going to see tonight is that even though the spark of a relationship isn't always ready to ignite into a flame over something, what we see is that the bond of this couple and the bond of your relationship that you have either now or in the future should be a bond of mercy and forgiveness and selflessness, just like we're going to see here. And so we're going to start in chapter 5, verse 2. This is where we're picking up after last week. This is the woman speaking. She says, I slept, but my heart was awake. Listen, my beloved is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. And so the scene begins, and where is she at? She's laying in bed, right? She's kind of in that phase of like almost asleep, trying to fall asleep, but not really there, but not really completely awake. And here comes home dude. He's knocking. He knocks on the door. She doesn't answer. And so he's standing outside the door and he says, open to me, my sister, my darling, my flawless one. Okay, he's like letting her know, like, hey, I know it's a late night, but I'm here, and hey, and she doesn't answer. And so, and then he makes an appeal about where he's at. He's standing outside the door, and he says, hey, it's late. My hair's drenched with the dew of the night, so that means it's probably early morning. So this guy we established before, he's a shepherd. Maybe he was outside tending the sheep late into the night. Maybe one ran away. He had to go chase it down. Whatever it might be, it's apparent that he is home later than usual. It is probable that she is in bed. It's natural that she would be there, already trying to go to sleep. But he's saying, hey, I'm outside. It's cold. It's damp. If somebody's standing outside your door knocking and they're drenched, there's kind of an urgency, like, please let me in the door. And so he's saying, hey, I love you. Please let me in. And again, she doesn't respond. And this is the next part of text that we get. This is the woman again. She says, I've taken off my robe. Must I put it on again? I've washed my feet. Must I soil them again? Now, it's not likely that she's saying this is bringing us through her thoughts. It's that I'm already comfortable. I'm already in bed. I got to get up. If I get up, and he's got that on his mind, there goes sleep for a little while. So I'm tired. Don't want that to happen. And then I've already washed my feet. If I get up, the floor's dusty. I'm going to have to wipe my feet down again. By that point, I'm already awake. Maybe he'll just go away. Maybe he'll just leave and go. And so that's kind of the thoughts that's going through her mind. And this is the same woman that just 2 chapters ago, this is what she said in chapter 3. She says, all night long on my bed, I looked for the one my heart loves. I looked for him, but did not find him. She was so excited just 2 chapters ago at the thought of him being there. They weren't married then. They hadn't experienced this familiarity. The newness hadn't even happened, much less gone away. And so you see this change in how she even thinks about it. She's excited, but then that fades away, and now it's just the routine. I know who is behind that door. I know what happens. Like, there's nothing that she's excited about in this moment. The newness had gone. Now, I do want to cover real quick, as we get into the issue of what's going on here, the issue isn't the fact that she doesn't want to have sex with her husband, okay? There are times when it is understandable where you will not necessarily want that in a moment's notice, okay? And it's not just the girls, it's the guys too, okay? And it's hard for some of you guys to believe, but there will be a point where you go, I don't feel like it right now. And it's okay to talk through those things, but be careful not to start putting your own desire, your own want, your own convenience above the needs of your spouse. Here's what the Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He says, but since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. He says the reason that you don't deprive each other is so they're not tempted to go and lust after someone else and fulfill that desire. He goes, it's important for you to have this relationship. The physical part of that marriage is very important. Don't negate that. Live as if your body belongs to your spouse. We know the two become one flesh. And he says, in that, if you don't want to, and they do, die to yourself and give your body over to your spouse. And in the same way, if they don't want to, and you do want to, die to yourself and put their needs first. It's not just for one type of the situation, okay? It's this idea of selflessness. You're supposed to take care of your spouse in all aspects. But that's not how the woman responded. She put her own comfort, and this is the issue. She's putting her own comfort and her own convenience here above her husband's romantic advances. It wasn't that she was sick. She just says, I don't feel like inconveniencing myself. And now here's where we're going to break away from the plot of the text for just a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the principles here of marital disagreements, because disagreements are going to happen, okay? How many of you guys in here plan on getting married or are married? Show of hands. Okay, that's most people in the room. You are going to think differently than your spouse, okay? If you have this fairy tale idea that like, oh, two become one flesh, our two souls mingle together, and now we think alike, you are wrong, and you are sadly mistaken. There will be differences of opinion. There will be little tiffs that you have over things that maybe you didn't think you were going to have tiffs about. There's going to be conflict, and there are common themes to which those things happen. A guy named John Gottman, he's a marriage and conflict researcher. He explained the most frequent topics of conflict in marital relationships include communication, finances, children, sex, housework, jealousy, and in-laws. Oh, come on. Oh, we got some for the married people there. All right. Now, it's interesting that the first one that he lists is communication, because communication kind of goes over all of the arches of the other ones. If you learn to communicate well together, then it makes the disagreement that you have later on about children or housework or sex or in-laws, whatever it might be, you've already established how you're going to communicate through those issues. Communication is a key thing that you've got to figure out as an aspiring married couple. If you have someone that you are seriously dating in here, you need to talk about how you are going to talk whenever the going gets tough. Talk about how you are going to talk. You set the ground rules for how do we disagree. One of the common situations, and this is real, and you got to understand, you have two people bringing in separate backgrounds. When you get married, you don't leave that. They were raised one way, you were raised another. Maybe she was raised in a home where parents were kind of passive-aggressive, and so she doesn't really like to verbalize her conflict, but it'll come in little snide things here or there. You notice that she folded her clothes, but not yours, and you're like, oh, okay, see how it is, all right? And then you have, maybe the guy comes from a family where they had the shouting matches in the middle of Walmart, and it was the knockdown drag-outs, and everybody in the store is like, what is going on in the toy section? And so you walk over there, maybe that's it. And so she doesn't ever want to share her opinion. He never wants to shut up about his. And so if you have those kinds of dynamics of personalities, you've got to figure out, okay, how are we really going to make this work? Jesse and I were talking on Saturday morning about some of the stuff going on in this chapter and some of the things that we've learned in our marriage. And by all means, we don't have all the answers figured out, okay? But I'll tell you, that situation is kind of similar to where Jesse and I are as far as personality. Jesse is much more a reserved, I'm not going to say much, and I'm like no, we're going to figure this out. Sit down, buckle up, let's go. And so it was probably in our first year marriage, it was one of those times where we were having some kind of disagreement, or maybe we were just a misunderstanding, whatever it might be, and Jesse has a tendency to kind of just go introverted, like she shuts down. And so it's not that she's not listening, it's not that she doesn't care, it's that she doesn't know what to do. And so we're talking, and she's just like kind of sitting there sullen, and I would go, what do you think? She'd go, oh no. And so finally I said, look, I'm not going to leave you no matter what you say. That's not an option. But if we're going to fix this, we've got to talk about it. And she shared with me Saturday morning, that was a moment that she finally felt freed to talk. All fear of abandonment that was kind of at the center of that went away. She said, no, I can trust him. This is my husband. We've got to talk through these things. If we don't fix the way that we're disagreeing now, then all of the little small ones in the future are going to turn into full-blown fights. It's important to figure out how you are going to talk to one another to keep that from happening. to not let the small things explode into big things that become wedges in your marriage when they could have been taken care of in a much more Christ-like manner. Think about your marriage as far as a boxing match. Whenever you have a boxing match, you have this team in this corner, this team in this corner. And you have this boxer, and you have this boxer, and each one has a coach. In the scenario, did you picture the husband and the wife in the opposite corners? Because that's an idea of a marriage set on fighting each other. Whenever the reality is, you're in one corner, and your spouse is there as your coach. And you're saying, okay, here's our game plan. There's a problem that we have to address, that we've got to go fight the problem. You're not fighting the person that you're there with. You're fighting the problem. So you say, okay, we have this game plan. This is how we're going to tackle finances. But what happens whenever finances rear back and punches you in the mouth? And you're the one getting hit in the mouth over and over and over. And you're like, hey, game plan ain't working, sweetheart. We got to talk about this, okay? You're not getting hit. I am. And so you don't turn around and start swinging at them in your corner. You don't fight your own team. You go over there and you say, okay, look, we had a game plan. Game plan sounded great in theory. In actuality, game plan, garbage. So let's talk about the game plan. All right, new game plan, here we go. And you go and you fight the problem together. You develop a solution to go and attack the problem. You don't start attacking your own team. Proverbs warns over and over about having a house that does not attack its own team. This is what Proverbs says. There's 4 passages about a house that fights itself. Proverbs 12, it says, an excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who brings shame is like decay in his bones. It says if she is bringing shame on the husband, it's a terrible thing. Decay in your bones, you die from that. Those of you who don't know. If you have decay going on, infection that you don't deal with, you die. Proverbs 27, a quarrelsome wife is like the dripping of a leaky roof in a rainstorm. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. You can't stop it. You can't get away from it. You can't hold on to it. You can't control it. A quarrelsome wife is just going to annoy the marriage over and over and over. A leaky roof on a rainy day, that constant drip, okay? And some cultures, they do that as a form of torture. It's a horrible thing to experience. Proverbs 22, do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Is he quick to get angry? Does he all of a sudden blow up on his friends or the people around him? Or if the order is wrong at Whataburger, they put mustard, he said mayonnaise, and he goes, this is mustard. One day, it's not going to be a burger. It's going to be you. And that guy's character is not going to change because of who he's talking to. If he's hot-tempered, he's hot-tempered. And that's something you've got to evaluate for your spouse before you ever put a ring on it. Proverbs 21 says, better to live on a corner of the roof than to share a house with a quarrelsome wife. If she's argumentative, you're better off living in the smallest quarters, furthest away, than to have all the floor space and have someone nagging at your heels the whole time. It's important to understand how to have disagreement and conflict without becoming angry or uncompassionate or naggy or quarrelsome. You're going to disagree about whether you put your excess funds in a savings account or a retirement account. You're going to disagree about how you discipline your child. Maybe you have a plan like, oh, we're okay with discipline. And then it gets to a moment and you think this discipline is appropriate and they think this discipline is appropriate, and you've got to resolve that conflict. And if you don't watch it, if you're not careful to establish the ground rules for communication of how you are going to disagree with one another, then what you do is you allow the savings account to become more important than the spouse, and that money becomes a wedge in the marriage. Or you allow the discipline, you put the child that you both love dearly can become a wedge in the marriage. You've got to be very careful about how you set yourself up to disagree. You might say, but Justin, how do I learn to have conflict and not let it turn into a full-blown fight? How do I learn to do that? What if I know I'm hot-tempered? What if I know that I have these other things that go on in my personality? You need to have some self-awareness. And whenever you go in to talk about how you are going to talk, you need to say, hey, I struggle with being hot-tempered. I struggle with elevating my voice whenever I get passionate about something. And if you start to understand how the other person works, you break down like, hey, here's where I feel demeaned. This is what I've felt before from somebody else. This is something you've said in the past, and we'll work through this. But this is the kind of stuff that makes it to where I don't feel valued in this marriage. You have to have those kinds of conversations. That way you set it up to where they know this is not at you. And it doesn't mean that you excuse that. If you're a yeller, learn to not yell, okay? I grew up in a house where elevated voices were normal in regular conversation, much less whenever we got mad at each other. And so whenever Jesse and I first got married, if I was passionate about something, I would start talking loud, and it was kind of one of those things where it's like, it feels like you're yelling. I don't feel like I'm yelling, okay? I feel like you're yelling at me. I don't feel like I'm yelling at you. Well, it seems like you're yelling at me. Okay, then I'll dial it back a little bit. You just had to say so, okay? But you need to establish also within that, how do I have conflict? You need to look at what is my end goal of this conflict. Is the end goal to say, I'm right. I'm right. That was the wrong doorknob. That one isn't going to fit. You're wrong. We went to Lowe's, we got a doorknob, and you go, hey, I don't think that one's going to fit. And they go, I think it is, but they buy it anyway. And then you get home, and you go, ha, it's not the right doorknob. That's not the goal, okay? The goal is not to win everything. The goal is at the end of all things to be able to say, hey, I still love you, and we're still pursuing Christ together. That's what this marriage is all about. Know the goal at the end of what you're doing. Now, within conflict, there are 4 common poor ways that people end up setting themselves up for detrimental marriages. This is again from Gottman. He calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. He says whenever you have conflict within your marriage, when you have that clash, when the newness fades, and now you're really learning what that person lives like, and you're learning that they really don't wash their socks too often. He says these are the 4 things that will kill your marriage if you allow them to creep in. 1 is criticism. Whenever they bring up something, and they probably bring it up with the best intention, this is your response here. You can't control their response. You control your own response. I tell my players that all the time. You can't control the other person, what they say to you, what they do to you. You control with how you respond. Okay? Same thing in a marriage. If they say, hey, I don't feel like you've done a lot around the house lately. This goes, oh, because you've done so much. Yeah. You see, that empty sink. Oh, wait, sorry. That thing's piled full. That spaghetti's 3 days old. You still hadn't done anything. Oh, yeah, laundry still hadn't been done. Floor hadn't been vacuumed in a month. Yeah, you're doing such a great job. Yeah, but it's my fault. Okay? That's that critical spirit of it. Whatever they've done, it's not good enough. If you start treating your spouse like everything they do is not good enough, that marriage is going to have a ton of issue. The second way you can respond, same situation, is defensiveness. And this is the one I'll readily admit, defensiveness is my crux, okay? It's whenever they go, hey, I feel like you need to pick it up around the house a little bit. And you go, well, this week I mowed the grass, I weed-eated, I put up the dishes on Tuesday, I even reloaded half the dishwasher, and then I did my own load of clothes, I washed the sheets, and you're naming off all the things that you do. You're trying to defend the integrity of what you have done. You think you've done more than you probably have. That's me most of the time. And I'll readily say, Jesse does a lot more at the house for us than what I do. And there are a lot of times where I go, you know what, she's right. I need to pick it up. Right now, I'm not doing great on the husband scale. And so whenever you have those moments, you don't get defensive, okay? Because then with the other one, you're telling them with a critical spirit, you're saying, hey, you build a wall. If I'm critical of you, you start building the wall. If I'm defensive, that means I'm starting to build a wall. Third one is stonewalling, silent treatment, cold shoulder. This is where you just start shutting them out. You can't shut your spouse out. The Bible says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. That's a great verse to live by in your marriage. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. That means whenever you wake up, that conflict is still there. It's not resolved. You just have to hit it again. You're going to wake up, and the first thing in your life is going to be the negativity of what has carried over. Stonewalling. It says, I don't want to be a part of you. That's what that communicates. When you say, I don't want to talk to you, that means you don't matter enough for me to waste my breath on you. It's not healthy for a marriage. And all three of those, criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, all three of them lead to the fourth one, which is contempt. Contempt is when you get to a point where you go, I don't even care to be around you. Everything about you makes me sick. This part about you, I am sick of you. You get to a point where you're talking bad about them. And that's something that I want to make sure that you guys write as a practical piece of advice. Don't speak negatively about your spouse to anyone. Okay? Whatever disagreements you have, you resolve those with your spouse. Okay? This is spouse. Okay? You are married at this point. You dating people, you've got to figure it out. You're still weighing in. There are some things that you need to have an accountability partner that you say, hey, I know we're dating, but I'm going to share with, and you tell them the person, and you say, I'm not hiding any details of what goes on in our relationship from this person. They have the same thing. That's a very healthy thing to do. That way they know the ins and outs of your relationship. Within your marriage, that is a sacred place. You don't air out your dirty laundry on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. Whatever you have as a conflict with your spouse, you settle with your spouse. You don't go out sharing all the dirty details with your mom. You don't share them with your best friend, because guess what? At the end of the day, you snuggle up next to that person. Not your mom, not your best friend, okay? That person should be the most important person outside of Jesus in your life. Sorry, I covered a lot right there. All right. All right, whenever you are ready for marriage, whenever you talk through those things, that's good premarital counseling, okay? Things you need to talk about. I mean, you understand that marriage is a sacrifice of yourself, of your pride, of your ambitions. You are subjecting all of your life's decisions at that point to another person. Every single one of them. You are now a team to become one flesh. And there's a lot of stuff that you probably could have accomplished without them. But you sacrifice all of that for the joy that you have of doing life with them. And you understand that joy outweighs the selfish gains you may have had without that person. You look at the benefits of them in your life. And you look at the commitment you made, even in the middle of the conflict. And you have to decide, I'm in. There is no out. Once you put a ring on that finger, if you are following the biblical plan for marriage, you say, no, there is no out. I'm with you. This relationship is going to forgive each other. This relationship is going to see past wrongdoings. This relationship is going to communicate how to not have those things happen again. But this relationship is about Jesus. And if Jesus forgave me in the worst parts of my life, then I'm going to forgive you in the worst parts of this marriage. That's what being married is about. Of the people who stay together, Gottman said that stable marriages consistently exhibit about 5 times more positive behaviors than negative behaviors in conflict. In the middle of the conflict, there's 5 times more positive than negative. He says negative behaviors in distressed marriages are more likely to be reciprocated and become absorbing. If you're critical, they're going to get defensive. If you start stonewalling, they'll treat you with contempt. He said, no, make sure that you have the positive in there and realize you're not fighting them. There's a problem you're fighting together. They're on your team. And here's how all of that plays out as we make it back into the story. So she just turned him down. Really, just didn't answer. Okay? And this is what it says in verse 4. It says, my beloved thrust his hand through the latch opening. My heart began to pound for him. So before, all she's done is she's heard his voice. And she's heard him. She heard the knocking. She hasn't seen him. And so it's been this no response. We hear her thoughts. I don't want to get up. But then she sees his hand. She says her heart begins to pound for him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh. On the handles of the bolt I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had left. He was gone. My heart sank at his departure. I looked for him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. In the middle of all of her excuses, the reasons why that she didn't want to get up and go answer the door, how her inconveniences she would have to get over, she finally gets to a point where she goes, oh, that's him. And her heart stirred. And in the middle of getting up and getting robed and getting her slippers on her feet, time has gone by. He's already knocked. He already called. And the guy here says, she must already be asleep. And so he denies his own desire and he says, I'm going to put her first. He could have barged up in there and been like, hey, oh, were you asleep? I'm so sorry. Well, since you're awake, you want to, but he doesn't, okay? He says, no, she's asleep. I'm going to walk away. And by the time that she gets up and opens the door, he's already gone. And she understands that that's what he did. He just denied himself for her. And she goes, I wasn't willing to do that. And it says that her heart sank because she understands that the way she acted toward her husband was not right. She wants him to know that she's sorry for it and that she wants to be with him and that he is the most important person in her life. She seeks out reconciliation, says that she looks for him, but she can't find him. And she calls out for him, but he doesn't answer. And this next part, it's debated as to what the literal approach is or whether this is just all a dream sequence. But whatever it is, the point of it is all the same. It says that she looks for him and she calls for him, but she can't find him. It says she goes out. It says the watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city, as she looked for him. They beat me, they bruised me, they took away my cloak, those watchmen of the walls. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my beloved, what will you tell him? Tell him, I am faint with love. Now, as far as the watchman, that's probably her thoughts getting to her. She's getting beaten by her thoughts of what she has done. That guilt, that shame weighing on her. And she says, help me find him. Help me find him. If you see him, tell him how much I love him. And then the friends respond. They say, how is your beloved better than others? Most beautiful of women, how is your beloved better than others? They ask her the same question 2 times. They say, how is he better that you so charge us? What is it about him? Why didn't you answer the door then? If he's so great, why didn't you go answer the door? And now you're asking us to go help. What's so special about this guy? And in a way, it's forcing her to understand and think back to who this guy is. What is so special about him? And this is how she responds. She says, my beloved is radiant and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. His head is purest gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by the water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice yielding perfume. His lips are like lilies dripping with myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with topaz. His body is like polished ivory, decorated with lapis lazuli. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as its cedars. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether lovely. This is what she calls him. She says, this is my beloved. This is my friend, daughters of Jerusalem. She had every opportunity to talk about how he came home late, how he wasn't there when he was supposed to be, how he came in with kind of this expectation. He didn't even think about the fact that she might be asleep, but she doesn't go there. She doesn't look at anything that's wrong with him. She looks at all of his features, everything he brings to the table, and she remembers the man that she loves, that she married, that she committed her life to. And she says, he is manly and endearing. He is dependable and he is kind, he is protective and he is nurturing and he is strong and he is gentle. All of those things. It's just this compliment being poured out and poured out and poured out. She is building up her husband. She is forced to realize who he is as she says those things. And because of how she responds, her friends say, man, he sounds pretty special. They say, where's your beloved gone, most beautiful of women? Which way did your beloved turn that we may look for him with you? They say, we're in. Okay? We'll help you find him. They say, where'd he go? And it's like because she remembered all those things about him, she goes, I know where he is. I know where he is because he is gentle and kind, because he cares about me, because he's sacrificial of himself. I know where he is. She says, my beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to browse in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He browses among the lilies. All throughout the song, their love has been compared to a garden. And so whenever they say, where did he go? As far as physically, she's not answering where is he physically. But she knows in this moment that he's in love with her. And that he's not going anywhere. And she goes, where's he at? He's in our garden. He's in our love. He's in that bond, in that union. And it's like now that she realizes where he is and that she can depend on him, now the husband starts singing in the song. He says, you are beautiful as Tirzah, my darling, as lovely as Jerusalem, as majestic as troops with banners. Turn your eyes from me, they overwhelm me. That's a good line. I'm writing that one down. He doesn't come in. She says, where is he? He's in our garden. He doesn't come in. This is the first time we've heard him speak tonight. And he doesn't come in going, why didn't you let me in the house? I was standing outside, soaked and cold in the middle of the night, and you didn't get up out of bed. What kind of wife are you? He doesn't walk in like that. He looks past the faults and the things that she's committed against him, even recently. And he says, you're beautiful. You're majestic. Look at your eyes. And then he starts saying the same things he told her on the wedding night, showing her that she's still just the same to him in his eyes. The newness for him, he says, now this newness hadn't gone for me. This newness hadn't faded. Because just like with Jesus, his mercies are new every morning. He says, our relationship is new every morning. I love you more every morning. He says, your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep coming up from the washing. Each has its twin, not one of them missing. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. The exact same lines that he said on their wedding night. He's saying, you are the same to me. You are still my bride. I still love you that much. And then he starts with some new lines. He says, 60 queens there may be, and 80 concubines, and virgins beyond number. But my dove, my perfect one, is unique, the only daughter of her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed. The queens and concubines praised her. Now, if you look at the literal approach to this passage, earlier we saw the man, whenever he left, it says that he went out. And she went out looking for him in the city, right? And so the idea here is that there's some insecurity on her part. She denied the sexual advances of her husband. And there's probably a fear that maybe he left and he's going to fulfill those desires somewhere else. And he's saying that's not a possibility. 60 queens there may be. Those are women of power and of wealth. He goes, any of them that I could have, there's 60 of them out there. I can pick from any one of those 60. 80 concubines. These are the hot chicks. He goes, hey, they're everywhere. The girls with the cowboy boots and the booty shorts on, and they're just walking around flying it. He goes, they're dime a dozen. There's 80 of them. Virgins beyond number. The girls who are younger than you, who they don't have crow's feet around their eyes. He goes, there's a ton of those out there. You got some crow's feet. There's a lot more people without crow's feet than you. And so he's saying all these things, and he goes, but you know what? Of all these women I have to choose from, none of them compare to you. None of them. You are my dove, my darling, my perfect one. You are the one I committed to. You are the one I love. You are the one that I will choose to forgive and grow old with. And so we see the friends enter in right here. We just heard the man. They say, who is this that appears like the dawn? Fair as the moon, bright as the sun, majestic as the stars in procession. They see this couple reunifying. The man just spoke, and we see the woman entering in to be by her husband again. And she says, I went down to the grove of nut trees to look at the new growth in the valley, to see if the vines had budded or the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I realized it, my desire set me among the royal chariots of my people. She says that she went to check to see if their garden was budding again. This garden that in the springtime, at the beginning of their marriage, was budding and overflowing. She goes, you know what? Our marriage is new again. That growth is there again. That love is there again. We got past this routine, and now we see who each other is in the other's eyes. What this means is that she's ready to move past this conflict they've had. And she's seen the goodness of her husband. And we see his response here whenever it says that she's back in the royal chariots of her people. Just like the wedding day, he welcomed her onto his chariot. He says, no, you're with me. You are my bride. We are family. We are one together. And there are a lot of practical things that we can learn from all the passages we covered tonight. We covered a pretty big section. There are a lot of practical marriage tips and advice about how conflict can arise quickly and then how you can handle it versus how you should handle it. And I want you to learn those things. You need to learn how to talk to one another before you have a disagreement. That way you save what it could become. But there's something much more important to see throughout the story of this passage and the story of this couple. We saw a bride who put her own wants and comforts above the love that she had for her husband. Not long ago, she was so madly in love with him, and she was so excited about this new relationship that she had. And we see how in marriage, that if you don't treat it with that kind of passion all the time, there does leave room for wedges to be built if you don't meet the expectations of it. There are expectations that happen in a marriage. Take sex out of the equation. There is the expectation that you are learning each other, that you are maturing together, that you serve together, that you are growing together. There's an expectation there. And just in the same way of your marriage, the Bible calls Jesus our groom, and we are his bride. And so you have this bride who let the newness fade. And she got into the routine. And she looked at what the expectation was and says, I don't feel like it right now. And Jesus says, if you're mine, and we're really in this together, there are certain expectations. This is what I'm asking of you. Are you going to follow that? Because if you don't meet the expectations for your spouse, the ones that you agreed on in the beginning, whenever you stop meeting those expectations, they go, do you really care about me? Do you really love me? And that's the questions you got to ask yourself. When you start negating the expectations of Jesus, you have to ask yourself, do I really love Jesus? Do I really care about Jesus? Am I treating him the way that we said at the beginning? This is how this relationship is supposed to work. Because that's the relationship that matters more than any. You might be preparing to be married. You may be preparing to serve Jesus. And that's committing to him and saying, this is how this goes. He lays the ground rules. And you say, Jesus, I'm in. But if you've been at that place where you can stop and realize and go, you know what, Jesus, I haven't met the expectation. I haven't. You said, follow me. I said, do I have to put my robe back on? Do I have to go out? Do I have to get up and actually move from where I'm at? And he says, serve my people. Serve in my kingdom. And you say, but my feet are already clean. Do I have to get up and start walking and working again and get dirty? My life's already comfortable. I already have this career. I like the city that I live in. I don't know if you're calling me somewhere. I don't care if you're calling me somewhere else. You get to that point where you realize that you're really making those statements toward Jesus, then like the bride here, she heard his voice, and she denied. She didn't answer. But then she saw him move, and it stirred her heart, and she got up. And then whenever they finally met back together, the husband didn't come in brash and correcting and demanding. He came in loving. That's Jesus. Whenever you get to that point where you say, you know what, I haven't met the expectation. And you go and you reconcile that relationship. That's the goal. Whether you haven't had a relationship with Jesus and you say, you know what, now I need to make one. Or you find yourself, like Jared was talking about earlier, where you need hope. And you've lost sight of that hope. He says, bring it to me. Bring it to me. I'm here for you. I'm not leaving you. I'm not forsaking you. I am yours and you are mine. Let's do this thing together. Follow me. There's a lot of practical things we've learned tonight. But more importantly than any relationship and any conflict, you need to make sure that you fix the relationship with Jesus. That's the call tonight. Reconcile that relationship. Whether it's a time that you repent for how you've been living or that you've never actually made a commitment to Jesus. You want to talk to someone about that? Find someone in a blue shirt. We want to talk with you. But as far as newness fading, for those of you who find yourself in that mundane spot, know that his mercies are new every morning. And you need to experience his newness every day. get in the Word, spend time with Jesus, serve Jesus.